So, as a part of step 8, I want to explain the addiction and recovery, part of step 8, I want to explain the addiction and recovery process. So, when someone first begins to drink or to use drugs, that they're developing a relationship with those drugs or that alcohol. That in that relationship, those drugs are their friend. They alter their mood, they make them stop feeling like themselves, which they're trying to avoid, or allows them to fit in with other people, so for recreational purposes. Many people get into drug use because they've been through traumas. That was my reasoning for doing it, and that I had a family history, that I was born as an addict, so it was kind of a natural, easy step, and I resisted it for a long time. But when I first started drinking, that the alcohol was my friend. It helped me to not feel like me anymore. It allowed me to drop my inhibitions and loosen up and go out and be with people in ways that felt good and felt fun. And it was, the alcohol was definitely my friend at the beginning. Was the relationship that I thought we were having. As time went on, I went from experimental use, that you try something a few times and you see how it makes you feel. After that, you know how it feels. So, 4 or 5 times into experimenting, and you're not experimenting anymore. You're either going to stop and go, I got it, it was an experience and it's over, or you keep on using. If you keep on using, you move into social use. Okay, so this is the point where a lot of people nowadays are getting into drug use for recreational purposes. That I think I'm running into about a 50% rate. Again, in the old days with alcoholics, most of them told you of trauma that they had in their childhood and in their young adulthood life before they even started drinking, or maybe early in their drinking, and that it was due to the trauma and trying to escape themselves that they continued into their use, and that the alcohol stopped being their friend and became a big problem for them. But today I hear a lot of young people that get into drugs is because drugs is a big social rites of passage towards adulthood, or at least they think that it is. The truth is that a real adult would not be irresponsible, disrespectful, and all the things that drugs lead you to. Those are not adult qualities, those are immature qualities, and so the drugs are actually holding you back, but you don't see that in the moment. So a lot of people are doing the drugs because everyone around them is doing the drugs, and so they're just trying to socialize and fit in with the rest of everyone, and it starts off being fun for everyone. I don't think I've heard a story in all the years I've been in recovery where someone said, I totally hated the way that drugs or alcohol made me feel. It didn't feel like a good thing, it wasn't my friend, and I felt better when I was sober than I did when I was using. At first, that's not the case. It's a great escape, it's a recreation. So I think those are the 2 reasons why people start off with experimenting, to see what it's like, what is all the hubbub of everybody else saying this is great, you should try it. Then they continue using. It's a social thing. They fit in with other people. They feel good when they're using because they're in the early stages of their using. Eventually, their social use increases, and instead of using, once a month, it becomes once a week. It becomes not just on the weekend, but then it becomes, during the week to continue to feel a little bit better. And the people who started off for recreational purposes eventually start to have problems as a result of their using. So if you didn't go into it because you had trauma in your life in the first place before you were even using, if you continue using past the social use into where problems develop, you will have trauma at that point. And the trauma will cause many people to stop and say, look, I've been arrested, I've been kicked out of school, I've lost my job, I've lost a loving, caring relationship with my parents or my siblings or my wife and my children, or at whatever point you are, you're going to develop problems and you're going to have losses as a result of your use. The drugs or the alcohol are no longer your friend, but you're not willing to admit that. the denial is there that causes you to say, well, if it wasn't for these other people being so mean to me, that everything would be fine. My boss is so mean, the cops are so mean, that my wife is so mean to me that, leaving me when I need her, and I've got all these problems. In reality, you're creating the problems and you're not willing to address them and fix them, and therefore you've created trauma for yourself and everyone around you who loves you and cares for you. And at some point, all those people are going to have to take a step back from you, and hopefully you will say, okay, I admit now that the problems are a result of my behavior and that I need to stop the using and the drinking and the behavior that I have that is using other people, and I need to get my life in order. And some people can just stop and do it at that point. Other people may have gone a little too far into that process and got addicted. Once you're addicted, you're obsessively thinking about the drugs or the alcohol, how to get them, when you're using them. You only feel good when you have them, when you're using them, and you don't feel good as soon as you don't have them because you begin to go through withdrawal. So when you're using, you're getting the feeling that you want. When you're withdrawing, you go back to the opposite feeling of that. If you take uppers, then stimulants, then they give you energy, but that only lasts for as long as the effect of that drug, and then when you stop using, you go through withdrawal and you go back down, not just to where you were before, but you go below that level into a state of depression that is much, much deeper than what you had before, that probably caused you and led you to, I've got all these problems, I'm depressed about my life, and so I'm going to take stimulants, and that's going to give me energy and make me feel like I'm tranquil from the tranquilizers. But again, you're going to have to withdraw at some point, and you're going to come back not only down to where you didn't feel good before, but you're going to go below your baseline, and you're going to go under that to a deeper level of depression. That causes you to say, oh, I need more stimulants, I need more tranquilizers to make me feel good again. And so that's the addictive process. You obsessively think about it because you're trying to escape yourself at that point. But the problem is that no matter what you do to escape yourself, when you get to where you want to be, you take the tranquilizers and you feel all tranquil. The truth is, no matter where you go, no matter what you do, when you get there and you look around, there you are. So you can't escape yourself. So you obsessively think about the drugs, getting them, and feeling the way that you want to feel when you escape your problems and yourself, and then you compulsively do the behavior. And so addiction falls in the diagnostic category of being an obsessive compulsive disorder. So that can be taking drugs and obsessively and compulsively thinking about them and doing them. It could be sex addiction, it can be gambling. Again, there's a lot of behaviors that are obsessive compulsive disorders, but alcoholism and drug addiction are like right up there at the top of the list that are most common. So again, you move from experimental use to social use. You still think it's your friend. Problem use, you think it's your friend, but there's too much evidence saying that it's not. Some people will then turn around and say, I know that drugs are a part of the problem, I'm going to stop doing that. Other people will continue on and move all the way to addiction. In order to get out of addiction, you need some sort of intervention. So a group of people who love you and care about you might call you into a room together. They might have a professional to assist them in this, but they will end up confronting you and telling you these are the ways in which you've caused problems and trauma for not only yourself but for all of us, and the only way we can escape the trauma of your life that you're creating is to separate from you. So you're either going to get into recovery now, or we're going to have to cut you off and burn that bridge. And someday, if you decide to get into recovery, let us know, because we would like to support you because we love you and care about you. Regardless of whatever you do, we unconditionally love you, but we cannot continue to support your addiction. And so if you're going to stay in that lifestyle, you're going to have to do it without us supporting you. So that's the intervention. The person then has sobriety. As I said earlier, sobriety is abstaining. There may be a period in which they do that, but they continue to obsessively, compulsively focus on the drugs. But if they can manage to stay sober and abstain from the drugs and alcohol long enough, they will begin to practice recovery, hopefully. Again, I said I've known of people who didn't quite get the message in the 12-step program that it's about values and having a spiritual awakening of a power that's greater than you and not being your own highest power, being your own God. And so the people who don't get that don't really start the recovery process until they get that. But some people, and I was fortunate, I got that right away. As soon as I worked the steps the first time, I understood there was values mixed in throughout them, and that if I practiced those values, I would change my life, and if I didn't practice those values, I would not change my life. So this is the addiction process. If you think of the drugs as being a snake, and that we have things that are priorities in our life when we are sober, what in the program we call a normie, a normal person, a typical person who is not an addict, that they care about values of being honest, having integrity, caring about people, being responsible, respectful, having friends. They value their friends. If they're a younger person, they may be valuing their education, looking at what it's going to do for them in their life. They have ambitions in their life to do things, and their family is a very high priority for them, and then some sort of spiritual God or other definition of the higher power that is often a very high priority. All of these priorities end up being wound into the snake coil as the drugs progress through this to addiction. It's not so important that you're honest anymore. You're willing to give that up in order to hide your drug use. Your integrity in all other ways it begins to be not so important anymore. Caring about other people, I really just need to take care of myself. And so if I use other people to get my way, then that's on them. They shouldn't have let me do it. It's their fault. Being responsible, I don't really need to go to school. I don't really need to show up at my job. I don't really need to follow through with commitments that I said I would do. It's really more important that I get my hands on some drugs and I use. Respect, you lose respect for yourself, and if you don't have something, you can't give it away. So if you don't have self-respect, you can't respect other people. Friends, your friends, the only ones that you still have left from before are the ones that are allowing you to use them, that will give you money, rides, or whatever you need in order to support your drug lifestyle. Those who have set limits with you and said, I'm not willing to do that, then you just don't consider them your friends anymore. Education or ambition, those things that you may have, a job or school that you're doing, once again, that's not important to you anymore. It's not nearly as important as the drugs are, because the drugs are coiling their way up through these things. So basically your priorities keep changing as to the things that used to be important in your life, that you used to value. They're not so important anymore. What's more important is the drugs. So the drugs becomes more important than even your family or your God or your whatever interpretation that you have of that. And eventually drugs are the only thing that's important. That is your higher power. That is your God. So that's the full-blown addiction, is that all of these things become less important and less of a priority in your life as drugs becomes more of a priority.